Hi, everyone. My name is Bree. We're here recording at the CDAH, the Community Digital Arts Center. I'm here with our super lovely guest, Minnelle Williams. Today, we're going to be specifically talking about Seniors and Money. Of course, this is the podcast, but we'll be talking about end-of-life care. I'll be introducing myself and what my specialties are. I've worked for Scale Up since last April. This is my first podcast episode, and I have a lot to talk about today with Minnelle. We had an amazing first preliminary conversation and discussion, and we have that beautiful chemistry. We have a lot to bring to your attention today. So to start off, Minnelle, can you please explain who you are, what you do, what's your profession, and what brings you here today on our Scale Up show?
Absolutely. Thank you. I like that intro. I feel welcomed into the group. So thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Minnelle Williams. So I am a funeral director. I'm a class 1 funeral director. What that means is I can do everything from the preparations to caring for the families. And I specialize now in pre-planning. So getting our arrangements done ahead of time. I am also an end-of-life doula. So I've taken the course to learn about what is the process, if we are so lucky, I say it that way, to choose how we end. What would you want that to be? And the doula kind of helps you through that process. Similar to a birth doula, end-of-life doula support on the other side. I'm also a CEA. The CEA is a certified executor assistant, and that helps people understand what's involved when it comes to actually closing our estates and preparing our estates so it's easier for our families once we've passed. All of those things together create the culmination of what I call myself to be the end-of-life educator. So I use my platform, Ending Well with Minnelle, to educate the community on what's involved in end-of-life, how we can start these conversations now, demystify it a little bit, and normalize it so it's easier when it comes time to actually making our arrangements.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
That's
that's
very
me.
well-rounded. Thank you so much.
My
Death
pleasure.
can be such a scary topic. Coming from my background, growing up African, we discussed how, we can celebrate life when someone passes away. We could celebrate their life in very big, grandiose ways. Yet when it comes to having honest and raw conversations about, like, how do you plan this? How do you make sure that everything's okay? How do you make sure that your family's okay? Like, how do you, what's the planification that actually happens in order to really have like a smooth sailing process to, for example, if someone is terminally ill, how does that all come about? So for us to be discussing this, it's to create awareness. For one, right? We want to make sure that people know that this shouldn't be such a stigmatized topic. It shouldn't be so taboo. And the more that we have these open and honest conversations about what death looks like, and like specialists and experts like you, this is how we can make a small, scary topic become more and more vast and large and more digestible to understand. So now that you've presented yourself, I'll give a chance to myself to kind of delve into what I've done and
Yes.
who I am as well. So I've worked as a social worker. I graduated actually as a social worker this past April, and the last 8 months of my bachelor's degree was the hardest part of my life. I was an intern. I pretty much interned as a clinical social worker at the Neurological Hospital of Montreal, near McGill, so not too far from here where we're recording. And every day I was a witness of what terminally ill patients look like. They were diagnosed with stage 4 brain tumors, some very invasive surgeries that they had to have, families that were stressed, that were anxious, did not know what to do. And I had my position, my job, my role was to accompany them through this process and answer all the questions that they had. And once they come in there, we were discussing that one day you'll be okay, the next day you're not okay. I had a patient in particular who was a receptionist for years. She worked as a receptionist for decades, and her symptoms were so small throughout the last months of her life. But there came one day where she collapsed, and she was talking to now being completely nonverbal. So it's like she could receive
Mm.
information, but she like nothing. There was like no output, and that was devastating to get to see her husband who would come in and he, wide-eyed, wondering like,
Mhm.
is she gonna get better? And we have the
Mhm.
answers, but
Mhm.
as social workers, we can't give those answers until the medical side, the doctors, and
Yeah.
that medical staff can actually clear and give that information. So it was a very scary experience. And again, Manel, here when we
Mhm.
have patients that are not ready, that don't have anything signed, that haven't seen notaries, don't have no contacts, haven't been in contact with lawyers, and now you're nonverbal. What can you say about this?
Mhm. So I hear your story and I can empathize. I tip my hat to you to be in that space because it's one thing to be on the other side helping people afterwards, but while you're in that and journeying with them, it's really difficult. So kudos and thank you for what you're doing or what you were doing. Um, on that note, it happens so often that we think everything's going to be fine. And maybe it's illness, maybe something happens, but we think everything is fine. I put my child on my banking, so it's fine. Or maybe I didn't even bother, but I'll deal with it tomorrow because there's always tomorrow. Maybe you're ill, or maybe you end up going on vacation and you don't come back. And while you're away, oh my goodness, a bill comes, a pipe bursts, something happens, and someone needs to act on your behalf, but you haven't set any of that up. That happened to me. I remember my mother was traveling and I was suddenly responsible for the house and things that I wasn't even sure what to do, who to call, or anything like that. By taking the time now while we were healthy, while we can, like I take these moments that we have right now to encourage people, hear our passion, hear what we are saying, and do it
Mhm.
today. It's really simple. You can talk to a lawyer if you want
Yeah,
to. You can also just do it online. You can do things simply because a lot of times we think it will be fine. And then the moment something like that happens, where if she is nonverbal, she can no longer, well, depending on the situation, if you can no longer make decisions for yourself, someone else needs to be able to do that. And it's more than just saying, I appoint you as my power of attorney, whether it's for property, your finances, or for health, your care. It's one thing to say, this is what I'm giving you the authority to do. It's another thing to say, this is how I want you to
absolutely.
do it, because her husband's now there saying wide-eyed, what do I do? Now he has to decide what would she have wanted. And if she can't communicate that, he's got to make his best choice based on his information with her. But it's a lot of extra pressure to do what you think they would have wanted, as opposed to doing what you know they wanted. I had a story. There's a gentleman, I'll tell you one more story. This gentleman used to tell his kids, he said, I want to be able to watch the game and I want to be able to drink a beer. Those are two things that are important
Yeah.
to him, right? So if he was able to do those two things, then make the decision. So now when the doctors come and say, okay, we're going to do a surgery, but he might lose his eyesight, the kids know, no, don't do it. Let him continue as he is because it's important to him to be able to watch the game. That's what he values in life. So telling your family not just what you don't want, like I don't want to feel pain. Yes, that's one thing to know, but what you do want also helps us make decisions. So both sides of that coin are really important.
Absolutely. That's so well answered. And oof, I kind of have to have like a little bit of a calm down moment here because it brings me back so vividly to those moments where it's like I don't have these answers for you. Sometimes they turn to us to answer their questions because obviously this is a very high intense moment, like you're kind of like juggled inside of you. You don't know what to do and you expect professionals to seek out these answers for you whereas when you're in the hospital, what doctors or social workers are meant to do are not answer questions for your spouse or for you or
Mm-hmm.
whatever the family wants. This is a time
Mm-hmm.
for actually the family to come together and mediate
Mm-hmm.
what these decisions are and what the future is going to look like for that said patient. So, oof, a big calm
Mm-hmm.
down moment from that. What I'd like to
Yeah.
dive into
Yeah.
next is the pandemic. The pandemic
Mm-hmm.
showed us what a dystopian world can look like. Um,
Mm-hmm.
we saw a
Mm-hmm.
lot happen very fast, and it's pretty much parallel to cancer diagnosis. It happens on a whim, right? One day you're okay, one day you're not, and that's how, everything shut down, and people were rushing for water bottles, toilet papers, and that's really were people prepared for the pandemic? They weren't, and are people prepared for a cancer diagnosis? Are
Mhm.
people prepared for their family members to not be okay, and then for your world to blow up so fast? I think there's been a really large lesson to learn here from what we saw in the pandemic. And I remember going through your social media, and you had like these stats. You had this graph about people who pre-pandemic had their estate planned, and
Mhm.
after the pandemic, people who then started to plan for their estate.
Mhm.
So can you say something about that as well?
Yes, absolutely. The interesting thing is the busiest time I've ever had in my career as a funeral director was in
Of
the
course.
pandemic because everybody recognized the reality of death was right there. And I focus on the pre-planning. So they were all, I had a lineup.
Wow.
I had a waiting list for when I could have appointments to see people to arrange their funerals. Never seen that before, but it's the reality of it. Now, it increased, but we're getting complacent again, right? Now that things are kind of returning to normal, the realities of what's important are changing. And so that graph has
Mm,
done this and now it's dipping down again, where, okay, maybe we were thinking about it, but now it's okay. It doesn't matter. But it's interesting because you mentioned it when you said, okay, if one partner suddenly becomes ill, there's a one side where how are we going to care for them? What are we going to do with their finances and all of that? But there's the other side that a lot of people are forgetting. If one partner is ill, that income, everything is now gone. We're talking seniors in finance, right? You're on limited incomes, or maybe not, but regardless, you're accustomed to a certain amount of income coming in from both partners. If one person suddenly becomes ill, how are you supporting the other? How are you supporting the family? That's the other side of when we think of estate planning. That's the other side of it that's extremely important. And what we see on the funeral home side, after everything is said and done, now the humanistic side kicks in. Now the resentment is there, the frustration, because in the process, listen, when somebody is sick and we have to band together as family, people either band together or they separate. Like, you're going to do what you're going to do. But if you band together and you say, we're going to get through this together, you will put everything aside and focus, right? Now, when it's over and you've had a time, you know this, right? And you have time to calm, you've got time to kind of feel the feels. That's where we start seeing the resentment, the
yeah.
frustration, and justified or not, people feel a lot of things. If you take that time to make some arrangements now, like people are afraid of insurance. I don't do insurance, but I can definitely speak to the importance of it.
Absolutely.
If you take that time to set up an insurance so that people think my insurance is going to cover my funeral, your insurance covers
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
life, right? That way, if one person becomes sick, now you cover that other family member. If that, we know right now everyone's dealing with finances. Look at the cost of groceries. If you've covered the cost of living for your family, it's a lot easier for them to focus on care rather than trying to deal with both. So with that graph, I try to use these moments to say, hoo, 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 don't get complacent. Take that time, make it a priority, set your affairs in order, get your wills done, write your wishes, because we don't know what tomorrow holds. And it's really important that we prepare for it today while we're thinking,
This never
hopefully,
happens.
far down
Yeah.
the line. Right?
That's
Yes.
that's great because I'm as you're speaking, I'm thinking about again that same patient whose sister came in and was also just as wide-eyed as the husband and had like
Mm-hmm.
certain wishes and how things were supposed to go. And I remember them talking about the house and the husband being like, well, why would you interfere in our home? All of these things that, bubble up. So I'm sure you've seen your fair share of family feuds, of sibling feuds. And
Mm-hmm. Listen.
I can't imagine that you
Yeah.
must have just
Yeah.
like a list of, fights that you've seen happen. Go ahead.
I'm going to say
Yeah.
one thing. Just check your insurance who the beneficiary
Mm,
is. Because if forget a lot of ex-spouses had their ex on as their beneficiary. They never got around to changing that. And a lot of people will think, oh, it's okay. They'll still support, they'll still do, the right thing, what we think. You don't know how people will react, especially if they're in need. You don't know how people react. So make sure you have the right name who will receive your funds, because we've seen a lot of
Yeah.
stories now where if you give me money, I'll take that.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's the truth. That's the truth. Um,
Yeah.
there's no
Mhm.
sugarcoating that for sure. One of our senior
Mhm.
guests that recorded with Brian Smith, his name is David Eady. He's also a financial planner, and he's written a book after a pretty traumatic experience that he went through himself after losing both his parents. Pretty much like in a
Mhm.
span of a year. And it cost
Mhm.
him a lot for lawyer fees and a lot of fights with his siblings, a lot of back and forths, a lot of things behind the scenes that went on. And this is again a testament
Mhm.
to why planning is so important. We plan for our next months, we plan for New Year's resolution, we do all these things, but why not plan for ourselves?
Mhm.
And this always has to do with money is like the number one thing that always comes up. And again, when I
Mhm.
got into my bachelor's of social work, I was so close to dropping out and starting a bachelor's in finance. And luckily, I stuck to my gut. I really stuck to my gut, and come to find out that social work and finance are very much so hand in hand. And I wouldn't have known if I did not persist, if I did not persevere in this field, because in everything I've done and the people I still serve today, I work in a shelter for women who are victims of DV. DV is
Mhm.
domestic violence for those who don't
Mhm.
know.
Finance.
And if these women had set amount of money, I'm telling you, they would fly out
Mhm.
of the country. They would escape. They would do everything they need to do with that set amount of
Yeah.
money. Money is usually the number one thing that they need to unblock. They need to get their taxes done. They need to
Mhm.
find a new job. They
Mhm.
need to so many things, there's so much coming in mind, but there really is a list of things that usually always has to do with money that they have to acquire or get done first. So again, this is what I've seen also in the hospital with patients is, okay, do you have taxi coupons? How's your husband or wife, your spouse, how are they getting to the location in order to take on
Mhm.
this huge responsibility of caretaking?
Exactly.
Money just keeps coming up as max like top two, and sometimes it ain't top, it ain't number two. So
That's
again,
that's
we
so
really
true.
have to talk about money in just in an abashed way, how it impacts folks in our local community anyway here in Montreal. So this leads
Mhm.
on to my next
Mhm.
question. Culturally speaking, the BIPOC community, and even
Mhm.
focusing specifically even more on the Black community, we are two Black women. I'm African, I believe. Manel, you have a Caribbean
Yes.
background. So
Mhm.
for me, growing up, having these conversations with my parents is so difficult. It's
Never.
so difficult.
Never.
I feel like I can just hear my dad say, Are you wishing for my death?" Like it's like almost
Yes.
like you're putting death on them by just having the discussion of,
Mhm.
are you planned for said event? And my dad is nearing the end of his 60s. So I feel like there's also, when we add culture in this, the weight is even like heavier.
Mhm.
I know that you had
Mhm.
a little personal story that you shared as well, about how this has also impacted your family and roles that
Oh.
that you've had to take.
Mhm.
For me, it's something that's very
Mhm.
scary. I don't want to think about my parents going getting sick or anything like that. But then again,
Mhm.
this is what we have to do. So how do you think we can have these conversations with our parents? What's the best way? What's the angle, the approach
Mhm.
we can have to open up this Pandora's box?
Oh, okay. You have me thinking of so many things right now. Culturally, I think we love to celebrate, right? You said in the beginning, we celebrate when someone has passed. We celebrate their life. We celebrate them in death. but it's as though we don't want to deal with it up until we have to. And then when we have to, we'll start. Whereas it could be so much easier if we just started having these conversations first. So I told you about myself first. And you said you don't like it's we don't want to think about our parents passing. I would almost say rather than thinking about what we're doing as planning for in the event that they pass, we are getting ourselves prepared so that we have the answers that we need for their life, for their legacy, and for how things will move forward. Because myself specifically, I go through your living will is a document, or your advanced care directive. That's something that you give to your power of attorney, the one for health, so they know what your wishes are, right? So I go through a lot of those questions. Well, I tried to go through those questions with my father, and Caribbean man, his daughter. I'm never a professional. I'm just the daughter, right? So
I don't even want to.
I didn't get
I don't even want to tap into that. Sorry, I just have to put this in here. But what you said, I have to like put like asterisks on it, because you'll go to school, you'll do a bunch of training yourself. We are knowledgeable human beings, but it doesn't change in their eyes. It's like, oh, you're bringing this up to me, but it's like they're not recognizing the education behind it. It's like, I will serve other people, but I can't serve my parents when it comes to this. So what you're saying
Imagine.
is
Yep.
real.
Yep.
It's so real.
And I've given up. Listen, I understand that that's the reality now. So maybe I'm not the one, because it needs to get done. But if you're not going to hear it from me, that's fine. Let me bring you another professional that you'll then listen to, right? Use me for those who can't talk to their parents. I am a professional. Let me speak, and then use this interview, use this moment to say, hey, I saw this. Can we talk about? Here's a couple of things I use. One, it's this, use me. Number two, I say, you start the process for yourself. Because we always think, oh, estate planning, we have to do this for our parents. Yes, but we also have to do it for ourselves. So do both. Start with yourself, go to the appointment, kind of see what it's like. And then you tell your parents, listen, I'm doing this for me. I've already been to this person, meaning I've vetted them. Can you come with me just to listen? Don't, you know how our people are. Like sometimes you need to take some time. It's not going to be a one appointment and done. And if that's the case, it's okay. Bring them in, let them get comfortable with what this process is like, what's involved. It's not quick, eh? Like if you're doing your will, your funeral, your cemetery, your insurances, all of these things, it's going to take some time. So bring them in, let them get comfortable with the process, and then continue with them, allowing them to ask questions and feel comfortable. The last thing I'll say, and we spoke about this one I learned recently. So there's an episode of Insecure,
Yes.
if you guys know the television show. Yes. Okay. Where Molly is bringing her parents to sit down with her friend who's a professional. And her dad said something that opened like a light bulb for me, because I have a really hard time speaking to men about estate planning, right? A lot of them are thinking, I want this blinder. I don't want to think about the fact that I'm going to pass. I want to be strong and always. I don't want to think about that. Now, what Molly's dad said is he was embarrassed by what he had to leave for the children. And because of that, he didn't want to have this conversation. The moment he said that, it's like the light bulb opened, and I realized maybe we need to rethink how we're doing this. Rather than coming to our parents and saying, you've got to do this for me. It's going to be a mess for me afterwards. You've got to get it done. Let's give them some grace, uplift them first, and say, listen, because a lot of our parents, listen, if you're first generation here, the fact that you made it here, you've established yourself, you created a space for us, thank you. Let's start there. Let them know that we value them and everything that they've done, and create a safe space for them to talk about their finances. A lot of the senior crime that's happening, like my poor aunties, they call me, oh, somebody told me about this opportunity and I get to do this and I'm not going to get any fees. Right away, I know that sounds like fraud. Stop, don't go. But if they don't feel safe to talk to you about that, then they're going to sign up for it. So you have to create a safe space for our parents. It's the reversal of the roles, but it's important. and it will make it easier for us as we move forward. So that is my new approach, and it works really well for families.
That's again, when you brought up that episode, I also had a like moment because
Mhm.
anyways, there's so much that goes into everything, and if we were
Mhm.
to peel off every layer. I mean, here we went into the topic of men, right? Black men,
Mhm.
men,
Mhm.
fathers who are obviously of an older generation, and what like the baggage that they walk with every day,
Mhm.
being the people from where they come from. So obviously,
Mhm.
I hear my dad in my head right now saying like I'm the head of the family, like I'm supposed to take care of you guys in this
Yes.
certain way and make sure
Yes.
that things are okay and put food on
Mhm.
the table. And with pride also comes, like maybe some embarrassment, maybe some feelings of lack. There's a lot of layers here. If this is a conversation on its own that we
Yeah.
won't delve in tonight, today.
Mhm.
So societally, when we talk about this, there is grace and acceptance to not only have for ourselves as people who are children of our parents and who work with other parents, but I have to
Mhm.
still agree that there is an acceptance that they also have to do on their end about accepting what they have, accepting what they've done, and
Mhm.
where they can go with
Mhm.
everything that they've acquired in their time. So, oh man, this is crazy. My head is also kind of like wish-washing with all of this information,
Yeah.
because yeah, that episode really
Yeah.
it did a number on me as well.
And it's just the reminder, though. I just want to say that you have an estate.
Everyone does.
A lot of people think, "Oh, I don't have to do a will. I don't have anything." You would be surprised how much those little trinkets, the jewelry, the vehicle, all of those things count. And your family needs to know what you'd want done with them. So don't feel as though you don't have anything, therefore it's not important. Absolutely it is.
Absolutely. For example, like my parents really want to go back home, and like pretty
Mm-hmm.
much finish their days off there. Is what they always say. It's like, oh, we want to go back home. We want to go back to our homeland next to the beach. And I believe that's a dream for every immigrant who's spent decades
Mm-hmm.
here working
Mm-hmm.
hard. Every winter is a difficult winter for them, and even for someone who wasn't born back home, it's hella.
Me
It's like bingo, it's hella difficult for me too. But they have
too.
something here. And I always try to remind my father that like as much as you want to go back, remember that you have things here that you can take back home with you or that you can settle here. So all again, this is all about planning.
Mm-hmm.
Manel, do you see a specific demographic of people come into your office? A specific kind of people who are sending you these messages, who are sending you these emails. What do they look like, mainly?
Yeah, so for myself, I really focus on speaking to the Black community, on educating and making us comfortable with these conversations. Now, with regards to the demographic, those who are going to walk in or call and say, "I'm ready to get this done," are typically in their late 60s, mid 70s. That's when you will start putting forth the effort to say, "Okay, I need to get this looked after." The only thing with that is you're no longer working at that, capacity that you were before. So, what is your monthly income? Can you then afford to add, okay, now I want to pre plan my funeral and I want to do my cemetery and I want to pay for my will? And, by the time you and, it
It
gets
does.
expensive. So, what I do is really speak to the younger generation. I speak when I go to workshops or anything like that. I will speak to those in their late 40s and their 50s, those who are families with children. And I say, let's start here because it's a lot cheaper and it's a lot easier to put that same cost over a longer period of time. So the more we do now, right? And then all you have to do is check your will every couple of years, make sure it's still
Hmm.
valid. You start paying for insurance when you are young. Can we please put insurance on our babies? Let's do that now while it's really cheap, right? So that we've got investments for them in the future. Like if we start doing these things a lot
Yes.
younger, it's easier.
Yes.
And you can then support Because if your mom or auntie or whoever can't afford to do it themselves, you can also support them in the process, right? Because we know if they don't do anything, it's just going to fall on
Right.
us to cover those costs. So why not help along the way and make it easier for everybody?
Amazing.
Mhm.
You know, I'm thinking about what I experienced again in my internship and how it made me want to start a will way early in my life.
Yeah.
I'm 25 years old and it's like I saw all of
Mhm.
this happen. I was like, you know what? The moment I turn 30, I'm going to a notary's office and I'm gonna write a letter. I'm gonna do whatever it takes to have something ready. And again, this
Mhm.
is kind of like coming from a person who may think they have nothing, but I have things. You know, I've lived for 25 years. I'm a working Canadian. I have a car. I may still live with my parents, but
Mhm.
things mean something to
Mhm.
me that I could give away. You know, a buck is a buck, and let's treat a buck like it's a
Yes.
buck. So, what is the do you recommend an age for people to start estate planning? Is too young too young?
Ooh, okay. So that's a great question. There are levels to this. I would say insurance, parents start it for your
Okay,
children, right? Start paying for that right away because they're cheap, it's easy. Now, once once you've accumulated anything, now this is interesting. You might confirm with a lawyer when you should. This is just Manel's advice, so please don't take this as solid here. But once you can, there is nothing wrong with creating a will as soon as possible, because something as simple as your cell phone,
right.
someone's going to want it.
Wow.
And how often, when did we get cell phones? Right. So as soon as you can, now maybe you don't need to go to a lawyer and create a big document. If you've got one job, you've got a couple items, you have your computer, you have a few things. There are like Willful is a company you can go to online and create $100 will. You know, something really, really simple that just says, I want this to go to whomever. Great. Your power of attorney documents, you can create those at any time. 18, once you're 18 and now you're making decisions, let someone know who you want to make decisions if you're not able to. Because I'm a funeral
Mm-hmm.
director. I've been in this industry for more than half my
Yeah.
life. I know that tomorrow is not promised. And I never want to fear somebody into getting their estate done. But I want to educate you into the fact that, see how we started talking? I'm talking from end of life because I'm a funeral director, but illness, incapacity, any of these can happen at any time. So once I'm 18 and I'm making decisions for myself, I want to make sure that whoever is going to make a decision for me, if I'm not able to, knows what I would have wanted. So do those things, at least your power of attorneys. Your wills, once you have something. A lot of people say once you get married, once you have a kid. I would say once you have a job, like once you've got something, that's a good time to start looking at it. I'll give you me, for example. I did my funeral arrangements when I was
Oh,
21.
no way.
But that's because I'm in the industry, right?
Yes.
So I'm thinking about it a lot more than others. But
21. Wow.
I got I got all the cemetery. I did the funeral and I got all the cemetery plots. So I have the cemetery plots for all of my family. I have 6 of them, and those 6 are less money what I paid back then than what you would get one for today. So there is a benefit to doing it early because you're getting it at the earlier day's cost rather than waiting. All that to say, the sooner you can, please
Oh
go ahead.
boy, value of the market, eh? We have to also talk about that. Inflation
Yes,
is kicking us. It's kicking us in
inflation.
the butt
Yeah.
for real.
Mhm,
21 is
mhm.
it sounds young, but listen, if you're savvy, if you know what you're doing, if you know where to go, if you have the information, why not? So I guess to answer my question, too young is not too young. Start whenever you feel like you have something.
Or when you have the disposable
Right.
income. Because at 21, when I was living at home, I was working, I had income that I
Mm,
could use. These are kind of things. That's one thing. You set up your insurance as young as you can, right? Because that's based on your age and your health. So the younger you are, the cheaper it's going to be. Perfect. Your funeral arrangements, you pay for those. Once they are completed, you're done. It doesn't continue. So I paid for it over 4 years when what else was I going to be doing? I didn't have any big expenses. I didn't have a
mm,
mortgage. So at least now your money's going towards something as opposed to just kind of having it floating
okay.
around. You know what's funny
What?
though? Other cultures will do their cemetery, their funeral arrangements, and give it to their kids as Christmas
Listen,
presents. here's a Christmas gift for you. I've looked after
We
this.
were talking exactly about this during our first discussions here. Yeah, some cultures
Mm,
literally will do that, and that's to be applauded.
yes,
Like, I don't see that happening where I'm from at all.
100%.
I don't see that happening, and this goes to say, do you think that Black people are misinformed? Do you think that there? I mean, I know what the answer is here, but with your your expertise, what you've seen, do you notice that Black people are just not informed about these things? That the resources and tools are not available to them, and I don't think we've even spoken about how much it can cost to do an estate planning, because lawyer fees are astronomical. They're very
Hmm.
expensive. So also we're
Hmm.
we're we're talking here about again the Black community also leading with a certain percentage of poverty. Like income is not there like that. These are low income families anyway. So how much does this cost, and like, who do they really go to?
Hmm. I think for a generation, they were they were they had a really difficult time with the insurances in that industry. I think they were sold a quick fix that wasn't necessarily to their benefit. What we now know about insurance, what we now know about investing and all of that, there was a generation that maybe did not get all of that knowledge. And therefore, your advice that was given was put your money in the bank, wait for retirement, and continue. Right. And if that's what we knew, that's all we knew. So now this is why we really focus on educating and supporting the community, because a funeral on this side, between the funeral side and the cemetery, I'm going to speak for Ontario costs. Funeral cemetery side, you're looking at about at least $20,000, you know, 2025, depending on, oh yeah,
Ooh.
depending on what you're looking at. Yes. And if you wait until someone has passed, that is due within about 15 days or before the service takes place. So it is not cheap to pass. Lawyer fees, they can range anywhere from 800 to 1500, depends on your estates. But let's also speak about the fact that Black communities, Black women, there are a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of sole proprietorships, a lot of these individual businesses that we've been doing. That are we prepared for what happens when we pass?
Hmm.
Because when you pass, everything you have is deemed disposition. It's assumed that you've sold everything. So your house, your investments, everything is now given. Now, when it comes to your taxes, have we prepared for how much someone might have to pay at passing?
Hmm.
Have we thought about using charitable giving in death as a way to mitigate how much taxes we're going to have to pay? A lot. This on that side, there is a lot of education that still has to happen, where we are, working hard, making money, doing what we do, but are we preparing for what's going to be required on the other side? And in truth, I think that it's we're not, I don't know if we as a community are there where we understand and we're set up properly, but we're getting better.
I don't know, watchers and listeners, if you're probably feeling the same thing I'm feeling right now when you mention those numbers. I'm like, ick, ick, ick. I have to correct myself here because obviously not all Black folk, Black communities are low income. If
Mhm.
anything, Black folk are really we're on the rise. We're really going where money is. We're
Mhm.
working very hard, and we're two
Mhm.
examples right here.
Mhm.
But again, it's are we prepared? Do we have examples of our parents or our parents' parents having
Mhm.
done this before so that it can be, so it can kind of transcend onto us to have that idea that, hey, this is coming up, I should have this ready. And unfortunately, the answer is no. And again, me, for example, being first generation here in Montreal, my parents were born in Ghana. My parents don't even have their own birth certificates in Ghana. Everything has to kind of
Mhm.
like gears have to take more time to get rolling.
Mhm. And that side too, right? A lot of us, if our parents are from another country, have estates
Hmm.
in the other country as well. So if you have property, if you have businesses, if you have anything, bank accounts, all of that, you have to plan for both. I just had an interview with Unique, with a lawyer, and she opened my eyes to different Commonwealth countries and whether or not we can have one will that might affect the other. Like, there's a
Wow.
whole other process to your estate if you have an estate in another country, and how much you might have to pay in order to close that estate. So a lawyer here, a lawyer there, look after both.
So you see, you say that, and first of all, getting that information is great, but it creates feelings of
Mhm.
like it's complex, it's complicated, it feels complicated to do, and when something feels scary and you're not too sure if you're going to be successful at it, it's a pushback feeling. It's like, you know what, I'll leave this to later.
Mhm.
You'll procrastinate, you'll shut an eye to it, you just won't attend to that matter, and that's what also creates
Mhm.
this unprepared situation where, oh, okay, now this big event now happens medically, and now you have nothing done in the background. So I think, again, too, being honest about the steps that need to be taken. And yes, it's scary. Yes, it looks complicated. Yes, there are fees. All of that is natural. It's the process. These are the policies that surround estate planning. We have to also
Mhm.
really like shine a light on that.
Yes. So I offer 50-minute conversations, like just call and walk through the process. I'm in Ontario, but because of that exact reason. Now, I'll tell you the fun story for me is learning how to communicate with people on this because I know everything that has to be done. By the time I give you a checklist and start talking about what you've done and what might need
Hmm.
to be done, people are overwhelmed and they're like, thank you, Manel, never mind, goodbye. So learning how to, this is what I'm really glad about social media, right? Go watch a video. You just watch it on your time, watch it while you're cooking, and you're getting the information and you get it in digestible bits. I'm on TikTok all the time looking and learning. The only thing with those TikToks is a lot of them are talking about American
Hmm.
laws, right? So it's different for us over here. So you have to make sure the information you're getting is relative to the province, the city where you are, right? But it's those small digestible bits because no one says you have to create your whole estate plan this month. No, but start. The first step is having a conversation. Talk to your family about what's important to you in your life and what's important to you if you're not able to make decisions. That's the first most important thing. It's free. All it takes is a little courage. So I would always say to start there. And then from there, you go through it together.
I think I said to you how I don't know if I know end of life doulas here in Quebec because we're
Mhm.
obviously in Quebec and Montreal. I don't think I could even name
Yes.
one. And even when Brian had spoken about you, I was like, oh, okay, like this is a thing. Like we could talk about this. Like this is
Mhm.
about this also has to do with money. So it kind of like
Mhm.
gave me like a bigger array of the possibilities and discussions that we could have. And
Mhm.
to speak on what you said earlier, the consultation that you offer couples that come in or whoever to talk about their life situation and to delve into that topic, what we do is an art. You have to learn how to communicate
Mhm.
and to find the words to say and
Mhm.
where to go. And
Mhm.
for me, I don't think I realized how much social work had so much to do with communications. I was really surprised when I was put
Mhm.
in front of a very stressed, overwhelmed, anxious family, and I would also kind of like have that transfer of emotions and block, not know what to say, not know where to go with my approach, my intervention with them. So it really is an art, and I'm guessing for you throughout your years of practice, you've really learned this and like exercised this enough to get to where you are today. But it really is an art. It's an art, and I could probably almost guess here that you've also taken on the hat of like a therapist almost, like calming down families. I know you wear many hats, for sure, for sure.
Yes. I try to avoid that one as much as possible. Refer out, because I was about to say, there is that connection between this process, the practical process, and the emotional aspect. Because if you take me as an example, when I had to start going through this with my dad is going through dementia now. And the practical side says, I know what we need to do. And then the emotional side looks at the house. the whole house that I now have to go through every single one of those manila envelopes where he has who knows what inside because I don't know if what's in there is important or not. Like the stress that someone is going through, like we talk about that when we talk to families, and I'll say we'll go over one thing and I will say the same thing to them 4 times, no problem. I'm not going to be like, oh, we talked about this already.
No.
Never. We're going to say this as many times as we need because I understand that you're only retaining about a quarter of what I'm
Absolutely.
telling you right now. Your brain is doing and holding so much, especially between when someone has passed or when someone is ill. There are so many things that have to be done. It is exhausting and overwhelming. So having that side, that self-care in the midst of estate planning, don't forget about that because this can be overwhelming. And even if everything is great and I'm doing the estate plan, thinking far, far in the future, and we're in the appointment and everything is fun, we're laughing about it because we're thinking, this is just what it is. It's part of what we're doing and we're making it enjoyable. Like it's not uncommon for me to have a good time in these arrangements because we're going to make it as good as we can. Now, when it's done, when I give you that paperwork and you go home, you're by yourself and you're looking at it and you're realizing, this is what I just did.
Yeah.
Be overwhelming. It can hit you. Those emotions come through. And that's why I always have to have a team. Always have. If you need to call someone, if you want to talk about it, sometimes, listen, we used to have families who would just come by all the time just to sit and talk. And it's fine, right? Just because I feel comfortable here. Not many people are comfortable having death talks.
No, definitely not.
In reality. So I'm comfortable there. It's not often you meet me. If we just meet and we're having tea, next we're talking about your loved one who passed 10 years ago. It's not uncommon for me, but I create a space where you're comfortable there. So exactly what you're saying, we have to be cognizant of the fact that while we're making these arrangements, our emotions are 100% there as well. And do not forget about your self-care while going through this process. That's why I say if you need to do it slowly with them, give them time for breaks, do it because this is difficult and it's reality. So you never want to push too hard.
That's so well said. I think it's important to put yourself, don't do this too often, but in times when it matters, to put yourself in their shoes, how the family must be feeling and how you in turn as a professional can really, mitigate the situation as best as you can. None of us want to find ourselves in that situation at all, or we pray that it happens way far in our lives. But yes, self-care, holding space, being patient. It's a lot to work around as professionals, and I want to tip my hat off to you as much as I want to do it back to myself and the experiences that I've had.
Absolutely, right back.
Yeah, I don't know what else to ask here. I feel like we've really.
Well, can I share one thing?
Please.
Because I always want to end with your legacy. Because so part of what we are trained, I'm a trained doula, death doula, but I'm not practicing.
Okay.
And that's because I know my capacity. My capacity is to teach about what we can do, not necessarily to be with families through that process because of my years. Now, one thing that they taught us is about creating that legacy. I call it your legacy plan. In that case, now we're going to talk. Let's say grandma is ill but is still able to communicate. Grandchildren are hanging around. People are in the room. We don't know what to do because time is just passing, but you want to be there. Start going through her story. I remember I did this with my grandfather. I was like, tell me about a time in your life where, when you were scared or what was it like when you were growing up? Because as Black people in Ontario, our stories are not readily available. So take that moment to get their story so that it has posterity, so that it can continue. Whether you are recording it, whether you're writing it down. Remember the graphs we used to do in school, like a timetable,
Yes.
born, this first job, all of that, right? Create it. Take that time to create that. And it's a beautiful thing because it gives someone a task, right? Which is very helpful when you feel like you have nothing to do but all this extra energy. It gives them a task, the person who's maybe ill, feeling pain, exhausted. It gives them something to look forward to because this is fun for them to do with the family. And it also gives us a sense of pride We talked at the beginning, a lot of our seniors feel like they don't have anything. I'm just here. No,
You
no,
have
no.
something.
You have so much history. You have so many stories. And we as a culture just don't want to talk. I don't want to talk about that. Do you know how desperate I am for those
Yeah.
stories? I want to know your history. So take that moment to share it, share your legacy, because that is the intangible that we crave the moment someone passes. The moment they're gone, we're going for pictures, we're going for stories, we're going to tell each other kind of backstories, meeting coworkers and all of that, because that's your legacy. That's what carries on when we're gone.
Legacy keyword for this podcast episode, because
Mhm.
indeed legacy is very important. A family tree, if you can even like, for
Yeah,
me, I don't even think I can
absolutely.
even draw that for myself because unfortunately I didn't get the chance to know
Mhm.
my grandparents, right? And for my parents probably on their end as well. So there is a lot of history there if you can dig and have the people who were still alive to tell us. A lot of us don't. We don't have that opportunity to go to those people and really suck those stories out and have something to tell of our own to our offspring. So that's really well said. And I think for me to also end this off, Manel, we spoke about security, about how finances, money, estate, all of this is really synonymous to feeling secure in the decisions that we're making and what we're leaving to our families. I spoke very briefly about having me being as a queer individual, how it was really shaky
Mhm.
grounds for me trying to understand who I am and where to fit in this
Mhm.
world, and how that for me was just like so overwhelming, and it made me feel othered. It made me feel like I didn't have
Mhm.
a spot here on this earth. And for a long time, I had to like think about what would make me feel secure, what would pretty much found my way of life. And for me, the answer was always like, well, okay, have money prepared, like go to work, go to school, have an
Mhm.
education,
Mhm.
always have something that you can, fall back on, like always have a cushion, always have plan
Mhm.
B, C, all the way to Z. And for me, money has always been sort of
Yes.
like
Yeah.
both a sense of, it always made me kind of a little bit anxious, but there was also security and
Mhm.
planning in that. So
Mhm.
when we talk about legacy, to me, again, what that brings up again is security. Knowing your legacy is a sense of security.
Mhm.
It's an awareness as well of who you are. So, yeah, to all who are listening and watching, do you know what your legacy is? What's the sense of security for you? Is it money? Is it family? It could be so many things. And I'm sure, Manel, you have your own personal answer here, but money, family, security, all of that to me has been so important. And I wish to grow out of like this hardness I have about, oh, well, I have to be prepared for anything that's going to happen. And eventually, as I grow up, I'll be more focused on legacy and family. I think as in my mid 20s right now, we're all trying to establish ourselves. Different parts of our lives mean different things. But as we grow up and as we evolve, we are also pretty much writing down what our legacy is going to look like. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. I'll say we're all still holding and preparing and trying to plan for whatever the future might hold. So there's still that aspect, regardless of where we are in life.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
And this world is just so
Mhm.
shaky. There's so much going on. There's so much violence. There's so much hate. Unfortunately, it's
Mhm.
it's that hasn't changed. I would want to say, oh, like that's such a 3,000 years ago type of thing that happens. But no, we're still going through these tough times. So yes, there is that trauma still in us, that we have to really fight through every day. But yeah, thank you so much, Manel, for your knowledge. I feel like you just like really went into your toolbox of your brain and just gave out everything that you know. So thank you so much for this. I know that you're doing very important work for the Black community. Again, I applaud you and I commend you for doing this hard work. It's not easy. Our professions are really not easy. Self-care is number one. But do continue on. And we've been so lucky to have you on as a guest here at Scale Up Seniors and Money. You're definitely not a senior, not yet, but again, the knowledge you
Hey.
have, the knowledge that you have.
Listen, I love my seniors.
Yes, we love our seniors. But again, what's been important here is that knowledge about seniors and how seniors can also prepare themselves, even if it's late in their life, it's never too late. So thank you, Minnelle. Are there any last words you'd like to say before we close off this wonderful episode?
No, that's all. I encourage people to use this conversation as a launching pad to start the conversation. Just start with that first step. If I can support, reach out. Like, I'm here to teach, to share, and it's clear. I love doing
Yeah.
this. So like, I hope that this episode is shared vast and wide. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it
Of
being here.
course. Well, thank you guys for all watching. Again, we are here at the CDAH, the Community Digital Arts Hub, Seniors and Money, Scale Up Financial Empowerment. Have a nice day.